Good afternoon. We will call to order the Land Management Committee of the Diversion Board of Authority Wednesday, April 24th, 2019. Could we have a roll call, please?
Borboom.
Here.
Reitling.
Here.
Campbell.
Here.
Grubb.
Here.
Hendrickson.
Here.
Judd. Manju. Here. Olson.
Here.
Oh, he's on the phone. Peterson.
Here.
Sherling.
Here.
Strand. Zimmerman.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. You have an agenda in front of you. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? If not, a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. And moving on to item number 3, the minutes from the previous meeting. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to read those. If I could get a motion to approve, or if there's any changes, let me know.
I move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any further comments on the minutes? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And item number 4, property acquisition status report, item B in your packet. And I think Eric is going to lead us off on that.
Yes, Chair and committee members, in your packet, item B, the usual land acquisition status report. You can see the front page is pretty consistent from month to month, so no changes there, just kind of a overall familiarization. On the second page, a map showing all of the parcels and the status of where we're at with all those parcels. If you recall from last time, the changes to this time, there's quite a few additional parcels that are in the appraisal pending category, this sort of orange tan category. That's because we've ordered and have a large group of appraisals that are in process right now. And in fact, we've got more that are being ordered as we speak. So a lot of appraisal work going on right now. We've started to receive the first batch of those appraisal reports coming back, and we'll be reviewing those and having the Water Resource District approve the appraised amounts to make offers to property owners. So the process is in the works, and we're happy about moving forward on that. I would just point out, you'll see quite a few colored parcels upstream of the embankment, and in most of those situations, those property owners have reached out and asked to proceed with an early acquisition type process, and so we've got a number of those appraisals ongoing, as well as appraisals on the diversion channel, which is really the primary focus area. Subsequent to that second map then is the individual status indicators for the variety of projects. Oxbow, Hickson Main Avenue, not a whole lot of activity in Oxbow recently. On Hickson Main Avenue, we have some easements that need to be acquired, and we're working with the property owners right now to review the easement needs and negotiate those easements. I know Matt Stamnus with the county is taking a lead role in that project, and so we're anxious to get those land rights acquired to allow for construction of a storm sewer down Main Avenue in Hickson that will allow a small gap in the levee of Oxbow to be closed. So that's a project that is in the works, and we're hoping to be able to start construction on that later this year, although the late spring and process of getting those land acquirers might result in that construction in 2020. Moving on, the next page talks about cultural mitigation areas. So there are several sites along the channel where we need to do some cultural investigations. We've acquired the property necessary for most of those sites. There are a few additional sites that you'll notice we are in negotiation, and so that's continuation of work. The Corps does intend to start some of that environmental mitigation work later this spring to try to delineate where the artifacts might be on Cheyenne River Site 1 and the south of Maple River Site. And moving forward on the next page is the environmental monitoring areas. So these are sites where we have acquired a right of entry to eventually get an easement that will allow the Corps and their contractors to conduct environmental monitoring, environmental surveys. So they check the biotic conditions, the soil erosion conditions along riverways in the region. You can see we have all of the rights of entries in Cass County and Richland County. In Clay and Wilkin, we have the rights of entries on the city or county-owned parcels, but we have not yet requested them on the privately owned parcels. Just yesterday, the Corps of Engineers shared with us their desired easement areas on these parcels, and so we will be engaging with our land agent teams and with the property owners to try to secure the easements that will allow that long-term monitoring to proceed. Next page is on the diversion channel. You can see we've broken that down into 3 phases, and you'll notice if you've got a sort of an eye test, you can see the dashed lines around a handful of the boxes. That's indication of a change from last month to this month. And you'll notice that we have a group of additional appraisals that are started, some additional acquisitions in phase 1, and then you can see the budget thermometer on the right side as well. So we are moving forward. We have all of the appraisals in process on the channel, and the color shading will change from yellow to blue as we continue to get into negotiations, and then hopefully from blue into purple and eventually green, meaning we've acquired them.
So Eric, are we tracking the way we should be when you look at the hard costs compared to the number of acquisitions?
Yeah, we feel real comfortable that we're within budget on the channel. In fact, overall, I will point out there, you'll see on that thermometer, there's a little over $9 million of what we're calling asset lands. These are lands that we have acquired more than we need because the property owners have asked us to do so. And so this might be a situation where we only needed, 30 acres out of a 80-acre parcel, and the property owner says, I'd just prefer you to buy it all. And so we have a variety of asset lands. We've estimated the value of those asset lands at just over $9 million. At some point, we will want to dispose of those asset lands. We don't need to be in the land ownership business, is kind of our philosophy. And so we will be disposing of those through some type of public sale, whether that's an auction or a listed price. But at this point, I guess if this group feels like there's a good time for that, what we've talked about with some of our sort of land agents and specialists as they're out meeting with the property owners is it's probably too late to do any sale this spring. So the earliest we would likely do a sale would be this fall, but we know that we need to get the final design from the P3 group for the channel as well. And so there's a couple steps along the process when we might have an appropriate trigger to dispose of some of those asset lands.
So are we leasing that back, or are we farming it, or what are we doing?
Yeah, all of the lands that we own, whether they're excess or not, are being farmed. And in most situations, the previous farmer is continuing to farm. They're just perhaps paying rent to the joint board instead of the previous owner of the land. So.
Great, thank you.
Moving on, then we have the southern embankment control structures. You see the diversion inlet control structure. That is the project just south of Horace that was in construction and then suspended, and then now we'll be resuming construction here shortly. So we have all those lands acquired, of course. The wild rice control structure, we have 2 of the 4 lands acquired, and we're working on appraisals for the other 2. The Corps intends to award that construction contract this fall. And so the property owners are aware of that, and we're working with them to acquire their land, ideally before the fall, but the way the Corps arranged their bid package is they're allowing their contractor to bid on the work on the lands that we own as a base bid, and then on the additional 2 parcels as a bid alternate or bid option. And so if we have those lands in time, they'll be able to award the whole contract. If we have a little bit of delay, then they'll be able to award that second part later. And then on the Red River control structure, you can see the progress there. Again, we've got a number of those appraisals are pending. On the next page, then, the Southern Embankment itself. So this is all reaches of the Southern Embankment. We've just lumped them into one category for mapping purposes here. And so you can see the status, and then again, a budget indicator. Again, we have a little bit of asset lands on the Southern Embankment where we've purchased a little bit more than is absolutely necessary. In this case, not as much as the channel. And then the last page of that report is the upstream mitigation area. You'll see quite a bit of green on the squares where we indicate flowage easement without structures. Those flowage easements are, at least these squares are colored green to represent the government-owned parcels where we believe we'll be able to negotiate the easement outside of an appraisal process. And so we've colored those green and sort of taken a little bit of credit for some of those. Those might be previous flood buyout lots or other parcels that the cities or counties own in that area. And again, you'll notice on here, there's quite a few parcels that have this appraisal pending status, the orange color. So there's a number of property owners who have asked to move forward with that, and we have a number of appraisals underway.
This is not broken down by which side of the river they're on?
This is not broken down.
Okay.
I guess if that is something, or if you guys want to see other changes to this moving forward, let us know, and we can certainly amend this, but as of now, we've just lumped it all.
I think right now, it was just a question, I think right now, you have previous graphs that shows what's needed, and I was just curious.
I did have a question. You said that it includes properties that have been purchased prior, and then does that also include the dollars spent for those prior properties?
No, those
It's
don't.
kind of just hard to track.
Sure.
Confusing.
Yeah, so I guess like, for example, Cass County has a number of flood buyout lots that the county owns. We have not accounted for the dollars that Cass County or whatever had spent on those lands in this thermometer. We have accounted for, assuming that we have that easement, but not the dollars associated with it.
Is that it?
Yep.
Wonderful, thank you. Any questions on all of that for Eric? Well, things are moving along, the colors are changing in the boxes, and I know you guys have been, I've been getting calls, so let's talk about lands outreach.
I just got a text message from Roger saying something happened to the call-in. So I don't know if that's still active or not, but anyway. Regarding lands outreach update, I guess maybe just consistent with the message I was sharing, we've had a continued number of phone calls from property owners, and we're meeting with those property owners as they call. Most people are wanting more information. Of course, it's been quite some time since we've had real conversations with a lot of the upstream property owners because of the uncertainty with the project, and so I think people are thirsty for information. As you noted earlier, there's a number of people who are asking to proceed with the acquisitions. There's a number of other people who are, wanting to know how the new project configuration impacts them, and what are their mitigation options for that. And so it's not a overwhelming, but a pretty consistent and steady number of phone calls and meetings. I think I don't know, I probably have, 4 or 5 a week, I guess, meetings with various property owners. And so I think that's going well. In most of those situations, we'll field the phone calls and have some initial conversation, and then if they want to do an appraisal, we'll get them on the appraisal list and move that forward. We'll assign one of our land agents to be their point of contact and work through the process. And so I think the system seems to be working pretty well. Of course, not everybody's excited about it, but I think we're getting the information out there, and people are appreciative of that. So.
One thing, my observation of all the meetings that we've been having, there seems to be some confusion. I think, for example, the one we went to in Richland County where, we came out as a lands group to talk about what the lands acquisition process is. And their questions really weren't focused on, how it's going to affect me and my property. Their questions were much more, about what the whole project means, and really a lot of hydrology questions, and specifically with the Wild Rice River. So it was I think did a great job in addressing some of those, but obviously have to come back now and visit with individual property owners. So I don't know that there's a lot of a lot more we can do with larger public meetings. I think it really needs to be with just individual landowners. Because every situation is unique. That being said, I think in some of these larger meetings, people, I've heard from time to time say, well, I didn't get a letter. And, maybe there's some confusion because Plan A now, especially in the upstream area, has changed a lot for folks. So maybe they thought they were impacted, they no longer are. But is it easy for them to go on our website and see, can they put their address in and it'll go down and see if they're impacted, or how does that work?
Yeah, we could, maybe at the next meeting, we could do a little demonstration, or Rocky maybe is coming up to do it right now. We do have an interactive web map on the Diversion Project website where people can go in and type in their address, search around, turn on different layers. It's really quite useful. And so I think...
So you went right where to maps?
Actually happened to be right up where I left it.
Scroll to the top.
There's a couple ways, but if you go to About the Project, it's at the bottom here. It's interactive web map, but I also think it's on the main page.
Is that?
That's me here now. Yeah, right here, web map.
Okay.
Click. So then the web map. It's like this. So if you've used a GIS program before, they're similar. They're maybe not the most user-friendly right away if you have never used one, but you can put in your parcel number, OIN, which is the sort of project identification number, or your address. Or you can just second to load, but then we have all sorts of different, so here's the operating pool, for instance, that I hope will load here. So you can see, so the operating pool again is, you've heard Eric talk about. See. Well, I don't have an exact address to enter, but obviously you can really zoom in and see what's going on.
Okay, great, thanks.
Also on that web map, you'll see that there's different floodplains that you can turn on and off, and a variety of different layers. So hopefully it's useful for property owners.
Great, thank you.
I think, though, piggybacking off of your statement is that if there seems to be some sort of confusion, while it may seem that people are asking the wrong questions at these meetings, the reality is these people are still at these meetings. And I think that the more outreach and presence that that we have in these communities, I think really is the most beneficial. And so while people may not be asking the questions that we think are important. I think that it's important to those people. And so I would encourage you to continue the outreach, however it may be.
Yeah, I would agree that, that more outreach is definitely needed. What we've found, I think, has been most helpful for property owners is when we can arrange small group meetings, whether that's one-on-one or three-on-three or, whatever that calculus is. But then we're able to bring parcel-specific maps. We're able to talk specifics about each parcel and each unique situation. So we've had, I think, some really good conversations with property owners when we've been doing that. And so there's, a lot of that activity ongoing. Whether or not the group meetings still have some purpose and value, I think to Commissioner Mojo's point, that's certainly helpful. We've been meeting with a few of the townships. You mentioned Eagle Township. We've been in contact with Walcott Township. We've reached out to all of the township officers who have property owners that are impacted and invited or asked for a meeting, and some of them have responded, and not all of them, of course. But so yeah, there definitely needs to be more outreach. I would agree. And the other thing about that is, as we go and meet with property owners, we learn more and more about all the unique circumstances and complexities associated with the buyout process or the impact on those parcels. There's sort of the standard farmland, which every farm field is unique, but each field is a little bit different. Each property owner is different. And then there's a variety of unique businesses that are out there that we're discovering more and more about those details as we meet with people. Just had a good meeting this morning with a sort of ag research business that we weren't even sure existed, and so it was a good meeting to understand that a bit more and more.
Well, and I think one of the things that gets a little frustrating, though, is that we've had a really great, I think, reception. Most of the time, people are really eager to learn about the project and want to know how it's going to impact them. But we have had some instances where we have asked to speak or asked to just meet, and we have not been received at all. And that's frustrating, because we really can't get our message across or even know what people's concerns are unless they agree to meet with us. So I think people, those affected communities or townships are really doing a disservice to their citizens if they won't even crack open the door so we can hear what the concerns are. Anything else on lands outreach?
I have a question.
Sure.
When we switch to Plan B, there are certain folks that aren't going to be affected by it anymore. Was there, and to me, that'd be a top priority to let them know. Was there any kind of correspondence going out to them for that?
Right after we had submitted the, I'm drawing a blank exactly on when the timing was, but we did send a mailing out to every property owner within the townships upstream that were impacted, and encourage people to go to the website to look at the details. At that time, we didn't have all of the modeling that we have today, and I guess, so we didn't have specific maps for everybody to see, but we pointed them to the website, let them know that this interactive web map existed. The other, this may sound like a little bit of an excuse, but the other thing that's been challenging is most people that, not most, a lot of the people that call are on the very fringes of the impact area. And the hydraulic model, while it's really good and been reviewed thoroughly, it's submitted to FEMA for their final review. And I believe that's going in this week. And until FEMA gives kind of a final blessing on the hydraulic model, there's a chance that we're changing impacts, a few inches here or there, and for how flat it is around here, a few inches makes a big difference. And so as we're meeting with property owners, we're able to explain that, and I think people generally understand that, okay, we have to have the final model approved through the FEMA process. Explaining that in a written correspondence gets to be really challenging. We did explain that when we sent out the mass mailing a few months ago, back in February. And so when we've been meeting with property owners, sort of re-echoing that seems to be understood by most property owners. But so I guess not directly to your question, but I think we have done some outreach to let people know that the project has changed.
Okay, yeah, and, you know, it'd be good if we just kept in constant contact, because
Sure.
a few inches, I mean, it could make or break farmstead or what have you, so.
Well, just a few other thoughts on that. We have talked about doing like a sort of a quarterly, you know, postcard or newsletter or something to all of the impacted property owners. You know, we've gone through the effort of getting the mailing lists all developed for that mass mailing. And I guess if there's some encouragement from this group, we could certainly continue to provide more routine updates. I guess we'll have to make sure there's something newsworthy or different or updated, updated to share with the groups, but it sounds like that's a good idea.
Okay, thanks, Aaron.
Any other questions regarding lands update? Item 6 is appraisal services, item C. I don't have a C that I can see, but maybe I do.
I have another copy here for
Okay,
you.
great, thank you.
So I did hand this out. This just was finalized yesterday, so I apologize about the late delivery, but this is a similar to report to what we had shared with you at one of the recent meetings. I think it was 2 months ago. 2 months ago, we had appraisal packages 1 through 5, and in front of you today, we have a contracting action summary for appraisal packages 6 through 10. So in the short description about the request for quotes that we sent out, you know, which packages we asked each one of the firms to bid on. On the second page, there's a short proposal review and recommendation section with the specifics of those different task order assignments. And then there's a map on page 3 that shows you the location of all the parcels within each one of those packages, kind of color-coded accordingly. So just a bit more context on this. Appraisal packages 1 through 5 was for any new appraisals along the diversion channel. You'll see here packages 6 and 7 include a few additional parcels along the channel. These are parcels where we had an appraisal conducted several years ago, and we were trying to use that old appraisal to negotiate on, but things were not going well in those negotiations, and so our land agent said it's best to get a new appraisal. And so for those reasons, we have ordered, or we are proposing to order new appraisals for packages 6 and package 7, kind of the north end of the channel. This purple color is 6, and then the blue color is package 7. And then you can see the variety of parcels in the upstream area and southern embankment that are colored green, red, and yellow, packages 8, 9, and 10. And so this gives you a flavor of the location of those, and kind of gives an indication of the number of people who are asking to move forward with an appraisal at this point. Back to the contracting actions, we had received quotes from our qualified list of appraisers on these packages, and the review team met earlier this week, reviewed those proposals, and what you see here on page 2 of this report is a recommendation. Appraisal package 6 would be a task order with Compass Land Consultants, $48,000. Appraisal package 7 with Patch and Mesner for $39,500, and so on and so forth. These are contracts that we are proposing and recommending that the Cass County Joint Water Resource District will enter into. They are meeting tomorrow morning, and so our intention is to recommend this to the Water Resource District. It was suggested that we should bring this here for not only the Land Committee's awareness and visibility, but also to the Finance Committee and ask both this group and the Finance Committee group is this something you would like to see anytime we're awarding new appraisal contracts? Is this something that you feel is covered adequately with the status report? Looking for a little bit of feedback if you find this information helpful, or if or if you'd rather just have the joint board continue to do this processing.
I appreciate seeing this. My concern, though, is that there seems to be some objective factors in terms of how they were awarded the contract, and I see that you've given the dollar amount that each different firm would be working with, but to not know where the other firms came in dollar-wise, it's hard for me to recommend one over the other. And part of why is because the first part of your sentence said that these are qualified firms. And so if you had some Joe Schmo appraisal services that aren't really qualified or licensed to do this, and they come in $20,000 under a bid, obviously we'd throw those out. But if these are all qualified, to not know.
Well, to get a bit more detail into our recommendation, you can see on the first page, those are who we requested proposals from on each one of the packages. Not all of the firms elected to actually submit. And so what we received back was something less than what was requested for, which was fine. We wanted to review them on a variety of factors. Cost, schedule, we asked them for both of that information. We also asked them if they had done any previous work with the property owners associated with these parcels. We asked them if they had, any sort of concerns or, inside information about, what was happening on these parcels that might be helpful through the appraisal process. And then with that information, we also considered sort of work level and what other assignments they currently have under contract. And so our review team kind of weighed all of those factors and came up with these recommendations. It's not simply a low bid, although in most cases we were throwing out the higher priced proposals. And so, and then in some locations where we had an appraisal working with adjacent parcels, or if there was any sort of common family ownership, then we would, err towards the side of keeping with a consistent appraiser for those purposes. So kind of a variety of factors that went into this. Yeah. I don't know, Nathan, you were involved in that. Anything you'd like to add to?
No, I think you summarized it pretty well. That we looked at all of them closely, and for the most part went the lowest price, but there's a few factors that went into deciding going forward with other ones.
Kevin?
Well, yeah, I want to follow up with Commissioner Mojo's question, because it's a good one, and I would think, as I look here, I see several of these different packages were bid on by multiple.
Well, this is just what we requested. This isn't exactly who submitted on them. So there's, what we requested was where you can see the X's, but not everybody submitted on every package. And in some situations, like, for example, this Patch and Mesner, we had not contracted with them on anything previously, but they're a very qualified appraisal firm, and so we asked them to propose on all 5. Okay. But in their response, they said they would have the capacity to take on either 6 or 7, and either 8 or 10.
I see.
And so they weren't comfortable taking on all assignments. And so as we reviewed all that, all this sort of calculus and whiteboard session was going on to try to make our recommendations.
But in all instances, the first thing you looked at was who was low.
Well, that was one factor for sure.
I mean, if we want to make sure that we stay within this project cost thing, that's a good way to make sure of that, is that we're.
Well, I would agree. We did not pick any of the highest proposers for this situation, but keep in mind, this is essentially we're talking about generally thousands of dollars for contracting work. We're not talking about the price of the land.
I understand that. The first thing you would look at is what were they willing to do it for? And then secondly, how soon can, I understand where you got other factors, but what should jump them to the top of the list at first is if they're gonna be able to do it for the most reasonable price. And then secondly, you go into, well, when do we need it versus when can they supply it? And that could then be a factor.
Right.
So that you're saying that's what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you'd like, I can certainly explain that a bit more thoroughly, in the review report here, and explain the process that was used and all the factors that are considered.
It seems to me that if you're going to bring this information to us, it's probably not enough information for us to make any kind of real comment on. And on the other hand, I don't want to second guess your work. It sounds like, you guys went into great depth to figure this out, and we're not the qualified people to make this decision, but maybe in the future we just have some more information for us so we can understand this. I agree with Commissioner Campbell that, certainly cost needs to be a factor, but when you go back into these discussions later on and the appraisal comes up on a particular property that you're negotiating, and if it's off, it can create more problems in the end for us than, you want to make sure you're getting a good appraisal that everybody is comfortable with. And because that kind of sets it in motion, what the land next door is going to be paid for. And, if we have to defend it and when we go to court, we want to make sure that we've got that, that we can back up the numbers that we've got. And so I just, I think you have to be careful about saving a penny on something like this too. So, but I appreciate the report, but I just wonder if you couldn't make it a little more in-depth if you're going to bring it to us.
Well, I think,
And I don't know that we need to see it actually, but certainly doesn't hurt. And Commissioner Breitling.
Is there any correlation between acres and number of parcels and amount bid?
not really. What we've seen from the appraisers is they will look at the parcel, and if it's a straightforward, just a unique, one unique parcel, it's a fairly lower fee. But if there's multiple parcels owned by the same family, and that same family owns adjacent parcels that aren't impacted, the appraiser needs to look at the larger parcel. And if there's, structures or other features to that parcel that, might create some additional appraisal problem or appraisal effort, then the fee increases for that. So it kind of varies depending on the specifics of which parcel is, or of each parcel, I guess. And I guess back, Commissioner Shirley, back to your point, we can certainly continue providing this if you'd like. If you'd like more detail, we can certainly do that. I think our primary question was if the Water Resource District is sort of tasked with going out and buying all the land necessary for the project, and this is more sort of procedural, does the Land Management Committee want or need to see this type of information, or we just went through the land status report where you can see which parcels are in appraisal status. I guess either way is fine with me. I guess I was just looking for a little feedback on that.
What say you, board?
I guess if you're going to have a land management committee, it seems that it would fall under this umbrella. And so I think that to have more input in the process, it seems that it would be important for this board to at least see. And to piggyback off my prior comment, if our engineer brought something to our county board that didn't have all the details, that just, I understand your rationale between how it's chosen, but I could not recommend something without seeing the price as a steward of taxpayer dollars.
Anyone else? Well, Eric, maybe you can bring it back next time with a little more detail for us. And we can see if we have any further questions or if that answers the bulk of our questions that way. Thank you, good conversation. The Cass County Joint Update, it is Roger back on.
Yeah, Roger's still here. I think Eric covered, what's coming at us tomorrow. There'll be several offers that we will vote on for just compensation. And so far, things, no complaints, no issues. Things have been going smoothly. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Roger. Eric, do you have anything to add to that?
I think we have a couple appraisal reports that we'll be asking the joint board to approve tomorrow morning. We have, I think, a couple purchase agreements that have been negotiated that will be shared with the joint board and asked for approval tomorrow morning as well. So I think Roger hit it on the head. We're making progress.
And from the reports I'm hearing, landowners are satisfied with the process and for the most part?
Yeah, I think so.
Great. Then item 8, the Minnesota something JPA.
It'd be more at Clay County.
Ah, okay. I was in the right direction.
I'm waiting for Mr. Shockley to provide us with what our next step should be. I don't know, has he talked anymore with you about it?
I think the draft is in a version that it will probably go to the Minnesota members for review and then individually to the city and the county, and I would expect that relatively soon.
I know he's been pretty tied up with a lot of stuff, so I'm sure that's top of mind. Is there, what's the plan then, Eric? I know there was a little conversation yesterday about some of the Minnesota properties that might kind of get caught up. I think you've started some, or you've been in the middle of some.
As you saw here in the status report and on the appraisal recommendation report, there's a number of property owners in Minnesota who we are moving forward with, and assuming those are voluntary type acquisitions at this point, the Cass County Water Resource District is proceeding with those acquisitions. At some point, when the Minnesota acquiring entity is established and up and running, we would anticipate that that group then would contract with appraisers and contract with land agents and sort of take over the role for doing that work in Minnesota. So,
just a question on that. If that's being done right now, and so the ownership or the title to that land right now would fall in the hands of the Cass County Joint Water Resource District. As we develop, the intention would be for that ownership for the Minnesota properties to be with the MCC JPA. To keep it clean, I would hope that those properties that are acquired by Cass could be titled over to the Minnesota JPA when it's up and running and formed, so that we don't have two different entities trying to control those properties. I think it's great, and if we have people volunteering on the Minnesota side right now to get into the situation, and I think that could be something that could be worked out between Cass and this newly formed JPA, where we just have a simple transfer of title. That's all I'm referring to, because I think on the Minnesota side, we would like to have it all under one. And I know Chuck's head nodding there too, but.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Just to simplify everything.
So what that is, that is something that has already historically been done between the city of Fargo and Cass County Joint Board. So the land that the joint board bought within the city has been transferred over to the city. So now we are the owner of it. So
Okay, very
it can
good.
easily be done.
Yeah, thank you.
You don't know if that's been addressed in the new JPA, though?
I think it does indicate that the land owned by on the Minnesota side would be owned in title of this MCC JPA, so I don't know that the JPA needs to address the transfer of title, but
It's more of just a cleaning up of who ultimately owns it, and it's more of a message maybe for Roger who's on the line that even though they might start off owning it, ultimately it should fall in the hands of the Minnesota JPA.
Commissioner Brightling?
Hey, this is Roger, and we would have no issue with that, Kevin.
Okay.
That's something I think we would desire.
Very good.
Anything else? Any other questions about the new JPA?
Same problem.
Right, well, you may want to say that.
Did you have any other comments, Commissioner?
The only thing is that for example, the Cass County Joint Water Resource Board on the Maple River Dam, they continue to pay the real estate taxes on the property that's been acquired, because if they didn't do so, the townships would go broke in a hurry. You understand when you receive that transfer that psychologically we would expect the same out of you to continue to pay the taxes.
Well, I think currently, right now, we do pay a lot of taxes and like properties like that,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, thank you. Is there other business?
Question.
Yes.
A couple months ago, we discussed resuming detailed sessions with the Ag Subcommittee. Can you give us an update as to where that may stand?
And I'll let Eric do that.
we haven't made much progress, I guess is the short answer. That's still something we wanted to do. I know at the Cass County Water Resource District meeting recently, we talked about perhaps taking a group up to Winnipeg to see their project operation. In fact, there is plans to bring a small group up there on Monday if people are interested. The Winnipeg project will be in operation over the weekend. I think peaking over the weekend is my understanding. And so plan is to visit up there and take some tour. And so we talked a little bit about it at the Cass County Water Resource District meeting. There's probably some good lessons learned about, how do the co-ops and how do the farmers and the like deal with their situation. And at the Cass County Water Resource District meeting, it was pointed out that there's a lot of areas in northern Cass County, the Harwood-Argosville area, that are flooded this year, and we might be able to have some lessons learned closer to home from those areas. And so Ken Lougheed is one of the farmers that sits on the Cass County Joint Water Board, and he was going to sort of keep an eye and sort of monitor planting dates and is there a delay, and some of those questions that we get regarding the upstream area. So we've had some discussions on it, but in terms of any more deeper engagement with producers, we have not made a whole lot of progress yet.
So is there a plan at this point, a timeline or anything?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of value in doing this. We've been meeting with some property owners, some of the farmers, and that have farmsteads, and so there's some conversations that are advancing. We definitely need to pick that up because there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. Yep.
Okay. Any other business other than one item I have to bring up? In conjunction with visiting with Michael Redlinger about just our configuration here at the dais. It has been expressed to me from other board members that this perhaps is not the best way for us to have the type of committee meeting where, it's kind of a roll your sleeves up kind of get to work committee. Although all of this equipment is beautiful. I really appreciate it. We've got the maps in front of us. I understand they can put TVs up on the floor, but they also don't, and I certainly understand, don't want to be setting up a situation and then having to take it down and then reset it up. So I'm just kind of polling the different committees that are meeting today, and we talked, Kevin had a meeting prior to this with public outreach, and overwhelmingly, I think you'd agree, it sounded like they would rather be sitting at a circular table. So I guess I'm asking this group what your preference is.
And again, I think what we're hoping for is that all of the Wednesday afternoon committees would agree to the same type of setup, because that would make it good. For this particular meeting, having this with the maps is nice. I just think it's for these types of committees, it's kind of awkward when I like the old oval type of setup.
Well, I guess my feeling was that, when you're sitting up here, it's really the intention when you have an audience and you're speaking to an audience, and until the finance committee showed up, we're sitting here by ourselves. So we're talking to Dan out there. But anyway, so I would like some feedback from you. If you don't care, or if you'd rather be down there, or if you'd rather be up here. Outreach seemed to want to be down there.
Down there.
Okay, anybody else?
Okay, down there.
Okay,
We can do it.
Down there.
okay. All right, great. Well, thank you very much. Any other business? Then we are adjourned. Thanks.